The fluorescent lights of the Chestnut Grove Community Clubhouse meeting room hummed a monotonous, indifferent tune. Jake Hansen stood before the Architectural Control Committee, a rolled set of blueprints held loosely in one hand. The air was thick with the faint scent of stale coffee and the cloying sweetness of a vanilla air freshener plugged into the wall. It was a scent he'd come to associate with bureaucratic gridlock. And so, Jake concluded, pointing to a detail on the elevation drawing he'd unrolled across the particle board table. The 6-foot privacy fence will be constructed of cedar, stained a natural redwood tone to complement the earth tones of the home's exterior trim. It uses post and rail construction consistent with Section 4.7 of the Architectural Guidelines. The setback is 10 feet from the rear property line, which is double the 5-foot requirement. He had done his homework. As a freelance architect, he lived by codes, regulations, and guidelines. He respected them. He assumed others did, too. He looked to the 3 members of the ACC, 2 of them, a retired insurance salesman and a cheerful woman who organized the neighborhood block party, nodded appreciatively. The 3rd member, and the one who mattered, was Denise Caldwell. She was not just on the ACC. She was the president of the Chestnut Grove Homeowners Association Board of Directors, a position she wielded with the precision of a surgeon and the warmth of a glacier. Denise offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her pen tapped a slow, deliberate rhythm on the table. Tap, tap, tap. It was the only sound in the room besides the humming lights. "Thank you for your thorough presentation, Mr. Hansen," she said, her voice smooth and polite. "It's clear you've put a great deal of thought into this." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "However, the committee will have to deny this application." Jake felt a prickle of confusion. Deny it? On what grounds? I've met every requirement in the guidelines. I even cited the specific sections. The guidelines are just that. Mr. Hansen, a guide, Denise said, her smile tightening. The committee must also consider the overall community aesthetic. Your property. Lot 114 abuts the walking trail in the common area greenbelt. A fence of that height would impede the open, natural feel we strive to preserve for all residents. The other 2 committee members shifted uncomfortably, their previous nods now forgotten as they looked to Denise for their cue. The open natural feel isn't a defined term in the CC&Rs, Jake countered, keeping his tone level and professional. The fence is on my private property. My children need a safe, enclosed area to play, away from the coyotes we've seen near the greenbelt. Tap, tap, tap. The pen continued its steady rhythm. We appreciate your concern for your family's safety, Denise said, her voice dripping with condescension. Perhaps a lower, more decorative fence would be a suitable compromise. Something in a 4-foot picket style. A 4-foot picket fence wouldn't deter a determined squirrel, let alone a coyote. It was an absurd suggestion, and they both knew it. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a dismissal. He was being publicly humiliated, his professional expertise and parental concerns brushed aside by a vague, unwritten rule. Which specific rule does my 6-foot plan violate? Jake asked again, his voice calm but firm. Denise's smile finally vanished. The committee's decision is based on our mandate to preserve the community aesthetic and protect property values. The application is denied. She gathered her papers. A clear signal that the meeting was over. You'll receive the official determination in writing. Thank you for your time. Jake stood there for a moment, the rolled blueprints feeling heavy and useless in his hand. He had followed the rules. He had presented a logical, compliant plan, and he had been shut down by an arbitrary ruling with no basis in the community's governing documents. As he walked out of the clubhouse and into the crisp November air, he made a decision, He was an architect. He was a father. He was going to build his fence. The Hanson home on Larchmont Lane was Jake's sanctuary. From his drafting table in the upstairs office, he could see the wide expanse of the Greenbelt, a swath of HOA-maintained common area that separated their backyard from a neighboring development. It was this view, this buffer of nature, that had sold them on the house. But lately, the view had become a source of anxiety. He'd watch his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, and 4-year-old son, Sam, playing in the unfenced yard, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line for the flicker of movement he'd seen twice in the last month. His wife, Sarah, a pragmatic elementary school teacher, shared his concern. "I just want to be able to let them play without hovering over them every second," she'd said, her voice tight with worry. A fence is a simple, sensible solution. The fence was more than that. It was a physical manifestation of the security and stability he worked so hard to provide. His work as a freelance architect was feast or famine, and their home was their single greatest financial asset. Protecting it, improving it, making it safe, that was his primary job. A week after the ACC meeting, the posts were set in concrete. 2 days later, the cedar planks were going up, the rich, woody scent filling the backyard. He was building it himself, saving them thousands and ensuring the quality was perfect. His next-door neighbor, George, a retiree who had lived in Chestnut Grove since it was built, came over to admire the work. "Looks sturdy." "Jake," he said, leaning on his rake, "don't be surprised if you hear from the board. Though, I'm following the architectural guidelines to the letter," Jake said, wiping sweat from his brow. George chuckled. A dry, knowing sound. "Doesn't always matter." He went into his garage and returned with a thick, binder-clipped copy of the Chestnut Grove covenants, conditions, and restrictions. He flipped to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. "Just give this a read," George said, pointing to a highlighted paragraph. "It's the one they use when they can't find anything else. The last guy who fought them on it. Over on Poplar Court. He moved a year later." Jake took the binder. The highlighted section was 8.4.2, Preservation of Common Area Views. It was a vaguely worded clause about preventing any private improvements that materially obstruct scenic vistas from the common areas. It was subjective, ambiguous, and ripe for abuse. It was the perfect weapon for someone like Denise. "Thanks, George," Jake said, a knot tightening in his stomach. The beautiful, sturdy fence suddenly looked like a declaration of war. November 10, 2023. The fence was finished. It was a work of craftsmanship, straight and true, the redwood stain glowing in the autumn sun. Lily and Sam were chasing each other around the newly secured yard, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. For the first time in months, Jake felt a sense of peace as he watched them from the kitchen window. The peace lasted until the mail carrier arrived. There was a certified letter in the box, its green and white form demanding a signature. Jake knew, with a sinking certainty, who it was from. He signed for it and carried the crisp, impersonal envelope into his office. It was from Prestige Community Management, the third-party company that handled the HOA's administrative and financial affairs. He slid it open. The letterhead was stark and corporate. Formal notice of violation. Violation ID. UFC 2023-1/18. Date November 9th, 2023. Property 128. Larchmont Lane. Lot 1114. Owner Jacob Hanson. Dear Mr. Hanson, this letter serves as formal notice that your property is in violation of the Chestnut Grove Homeowners Association's governing documents. Violation description. An unapproved modification has been constructed on the property. Specifically, A 6-foot wooden fence has been erected at the rear of the lot. This structure was previously denied by the Architectural Control Committee ACC on October 25, 2023. The structure is in violation of the following article of the recorded CC&Rs. Article 8, Section 8.4.2, Preservation of Common Area Views. The erected fence materially obstructs the scenic vista from the common area greenbelt, diminishing the aesthetic value and enjoyment for all members of the community. Corrective action required. You must remove the unapproved fence entirely. Deadline for compliance. You have 14 days from the date of this notice to bring the property into compliance. The deadline is November 24, 2023. Failure to comply by the specified deadline will result in further enforcement action by the Board of Directors, which may include the imposition of monetary fines and, should the violation persist, the placement of a lien against your property. You have the right to a hearing before the Board of Directors to contest this violation. A request for a hearing must be submitted in writing to Prestige Community Management within 10 days. Sincerely, Prestige Community Management. On behalf of the Chestnut Grove HOA Board of Directors. The words on the page felt cold and heavy. Monetary fines. Lien against your property. This was no longer a polite disagreement over aesthetics. It was a formal, legal threat aimed directly at his home, his family, and his finances. The impersonal nature of the letter, sent not by his neighbors on the board, but by a faceless corporation, made it feel all the more menacing. The war had officially begun. November 25, 2023. The Chestnut Grove HOA Board hearing was conducted, as most things were post-2020, via Zoom. Jake sat in his office, wearing a collared shirt. His notes and a copy of the CC&Rs spread neatly on his desk. On his screen, 5 faces stared back from their Brady Bunch boxes. Denise Caldwell was in the center, her background a pristine, artfully blurred living room. Her 2 board allies, Treasurer Gary Franklin and Secretary a woman named Carol, were on either side of her, looking stern. 2 other board members seemed more neutral, their expressions hard to read. Next on the agenda, Denise announced, her voice tinny through the laptop speakers, is Agenda Item 4.B, the hearing for the violation at 128 Larchmont Lane. Mr. Hansen, you have requested this hearing. According to our bylaws, you have 5 minutes to present your case. Please begin. Jake took a breath. Thank you, Madam President, and members of the board. I am here to appeal violation Fight 2023-118. While I acknowledge the ACC denied my initial application, I believe the denial and the subsequent violation notice are based on a misapplication of the governing documents. He calmly laid out his case. He explained that his fence was built on his private lot, not common area. He detailed how it met every specific, measurable standard in the architectural guidelines regarding height, materials, and setback. The violation cites Section 8.4.2, Preservation of Common Area Views. Jake continued, holding the highlighted page up to his camera. This clause is inherently subjective. There is no definition of what constitutes a scenic vista or material obstruction. However, my fence does not block the view of the greenbelt. It simply blocks the view into my private yard from the greenbelt. The primary purpose of a privacy fence is, by definition, to obstruct a view. My neighbors on both sides have similar fences, none of whom have been cited. Point of order, Madam President. Gary, the Treasurer. Cut in. The situations of other properties are not relevant to this specific violation. Sustained, Denise said immediately. Mr. Hansen, please confine your remarks to your own property. You have 2 minutes remaining. The system felt rigged. They were using procedure as a cudgel. "My point," Jake said, trying to maintain his composure, "is that the rule is being applied arbitrarily. More importantly, the safety of my children is a tangible, urgent need, whereas the obstruction of a scenic vista is a vague and subjective complaint. A fence is the only reasonable solution to prevent wildlife from entering our yard." "Your time is up, Mr. Hansen," Denise said, her voice sharp. "Thank you for your comments. The board will now deliberate." She muted him. Jake could only watch as their 5 faces talked amongst themselves, their voices inaudible. It took less than a minute. Denise unmuted her microphone. "The board has discussed the matter. A motion has been made to uphold the violation and deny the appeal. All in favor?" Denise, Gary, and Carol raised their hands immediately. The other 2 members hesitated, then slowly raised theirs. "The motion carries unanimously," Denise declared, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. "Mr. Hansen, you will receive a formal notice of fine. The initial fine is $100 as per the fining schedule. A recurring fine of $50 will be assessed for each week the property remains in non-compliance. The board considers this matter closed. Next on the agenda is the holiday decoration budget." They moved on, as if they hadn't just threatened his family's financial security. The system wasn't just rigged. It was a well-oiled machine designed to crush dissent. The politeness of it all made it terrifying. The notice of fine arrived 2 days later. Jake felt a surge of anger, followed by a wave of cold dread. This was real. His HOA account was now delinquent. $100, Sarah said, looking over his shoulder at the letter. "And $50 a week, Jake. This could add up to thousands. Maybe you should just take it down." "And then what?" Sarah Jake asked, the frustration evident in his voice. "Let the kids play in an open yard. Let Denise win because she made up a rule. This isn't about the fence anymore. It's the principle." "Principles don't pay the mortgage," she whispered, her fear a palpable thing in the room. "What if they really do put a lien on the house?" "They won't. I won't let them," he said, more to convince himself than her. "I just need to find a real, legal argument, something they can't dismiss with Robert's Rules of Order." His architect's mind, trained to solve problems within a framework of rules, kicked into gear. If Denise was weaponizing the CC&Rs, he needed to find a flaw in the weapon itself. The term she used at the first meeting, the one that served as the basis for Section 8.4.2, echoed in his mind view corridor. He spent the next morning at his computer, not drafting building plans, but digging into property law. An idea formed. A view corridor sounded like a type of easement, a legal right for one party to use or access another party's land for a specific purpose. If the HOA claimed a right to a view across his property, it would have to be a legally recorded easement. And, if it was legally recorded, it would be on the official documents filed with the county. He needed a professional. He found a local land surveyor named Ben Carter, a man whose website proclaimed, "If it's not on the plat, it's just a chat." He sounded like exactly the person Jake needed. Ben was a tall, weathered man in his late 60s, with a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened to Jake's story in his cluttered office, surrounded by maps and survey equipment. He grunted periodically. "HOAs," Ben said, shaking his head. "Petty kingdoms with taxing power. Seen it 100 times. They write their own little laws in those CC&Rs. And half the time, they conflict with actual county and state law." "So, can you find out if this view corridor is a real, recorded easement?" Jake asked. "Can do," Ben said, pulling up a digital map of the county. "I'll pull the original plat map for the Chestnut Grove development and the deed for your specific lot. If there's an easement on your property for the benefit of the common area, it'll be recorded on one of those two documents. It has to be. By law. Give me a couple of days." The wait was agonizing. Another $50 fine was added to his account. He started avoiding George, the friendly neighbor, embarrassed that his prediction had come true so swiftly and decisively. The tension in the house was thick. Sarah was trying to be supportive, but he could see the worry etched around her eyes. During that time, Jake made another move. He sent a formal written request to Prestige Community Management under the section of their state's Property Owners Association Act that guaranteed homeowners access to association records. He asked for all board meeting minutes from the past 2 years. If Denise was up to something, the first hints of it might be in the official record. A week later, Ben called. "Got your documents. Jake, you should come see this." Jake was in Ben's office within the hour. The surveyor had a large, official-looking document spread across his desk. It was the original plat map for the Chestnut Grove subdivision, filed with the county recorder in 1998. "Here's your lot," Ben said, his finger tracing the lines for Lot 114. "And here's the common area behind it, designated Greenbelt. See these notations: utility easements, drainage easements, all clearly marked, all legally binding." He looked up at Jake. "There is no view easement, no scenic corridor, no recorded encumbrance on your property for the benefit of the common area whatsoever." Jake felt a jolt of vindication. "So, what does that mean?" "It means," Ben said with a wry smile, "that the HOA's view corridor exists in their rulebook, but it doesn't exist on the county plat map. Legally, that makes their Section 8.4.2 aspirational." It was the first real piece of leverage Jake had. Exhibit A. That same afternoon, a thick envelope arrived from Prestige Community Management. It contained the board meeting minutes he had requested. Jake spread them across his dining room table. A 2-year history of budgets, landscaping contracts, and pool maintenance schedules. He started with the most recent minutes and worked his way back. It was mostly mundane, but he noticed Denise's name was on every motion, her control over the board absolute. Then he got to the minutes from a meeting held 13 months ago. Several paragraphs were completely blacked out. A note in the margin read, "Redacted pursuant to attorney-client privilege, regarding pending real estate negotiations." Real estate negotiations. The HOA wasn't buying or selling land. Or were they? What could they possibly be hiding? It felt like a locked door. He had the key Ben's discovery about the plat map, but he didn't know what was on the other side of this door. He needed to talk to someone who had been on the inside. He remembered George mentioning the man on Poplar Court, who had fought the board and moved. A quick search of property records gave him a name, David Chen. Finding his new address was more difficult, but Jake was persistent. He finally found a phone number. He called, expecting to be dismissed as a crank. But when he explained who he was and why he was calling, David Chen's voice warmed with a sense of shared grievance. "Denise Caldwell," David said with a bitter laugh. "Let me guess. Section 8.4.2. "The very same," Jake said. "They're fining me every week." "I fought them for 6 months." David said, "It was about a small shed I put up. They claimed it ruined the vista. My lawyer said we could probably win in court, but it would cost $10,000 and take a year. We just gave up and sold the place. My wife couldn't handle the stress." Jake's heart sank, but then he remembered the redacted minutes. "David, when you were fighting them, did you ever hear anything about the board being involved in real estate negotiations?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "No," David said slowly. "But there was a woman on the board back then. Eleanor Vance. She was always clashing with Denise. She resigned right around that time, said she couldn't be a party to what Denise was planning. Maybe she knows something. Eleanor Vance. Another name. Another breadcrumb. Jake found her in the neighborhood directory. She still lived in Chestnut Grove. He called her, explained the situation, and mentioned David Chen's name. To his surprise, she agreed to meet him for coffee. Eleanor was a sharp, clear-eyed woman in her 70s. She listened patiently as Jake laid out his story, showing her the violation notice and telling her about Ben's plat map discovery. "I'm not surprised," she said, stirring her tea. "Denise believes the rules are whatever she needs them to be. When I was on the board, she proposed something in a closed executive session. That's what those redacted minutes are about." Her eyes hardened. "She wants to sell a piece of the Greenbelt." Jake stared at her. "Sell the common area? Can she even do that?" "It's very difficult," Eleanor explained. "It requires a vote of the entire membership, usually a supermajority. But Denise found a loophole. There's a small, unused utility parcel at the far end of the Greenbelt, right behind your section of homes. A developer building a new luxury condo complex next door wants to buy it for auxiliary parking. It would be worth a lot of money to them." The pieces started clicking into place. The developer's main selling point for their penthouse units is the unobstructed view of the nature preserve across our Greenbelt. Eleanor continued, "To get the premium price, they need that view guaranteed. Denise's deal with them is contingent on ensuring the view remains pristine. That's why she's so obsessed with the scenic vista from the common area. It's not for our benefit, it's for the developer." Jake's mind was racing. And the money from the sale. Denise argued it would go into the reserve fund to avoid a special assessment for the new pool pumps. That's how she was going to sell it to the homeowners. Eleanor said, "But I saw the preliminary offer from the developer's lawyer. It mentioned a substantial finder's fee to be paid to a consulting company." Eleanor leaned forward. "I did some digging. The consulting company was a shell corporation registered to Denise's maiden name." A kickback. Denise wasn't just a power-tripping HOA president. She was orchestrating a secret land deal for personal profit. And his fence, his family's safety, was an obstacle to her payday. "I resigned rather than vote on it," Eleanor said. "I couldn't prove the kickback part without a subpoena. But I knew it was wrong. I kept my copies of the meeting materials from that session, just in case." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. "I think you'll find these minutes are much more complete." Jake unfolded them. There, in stark black and white, was the entire plan. The negotiations with the developer, the proposed sale price, and the name of the consulting firm set to receive a $50,000 fee. The locked door had been blown wide open. He now had Exhibit B, the unredacted truth. December 12, 2023. Just as Jake was beginning to feel the tide turn, the HOA escalated. A new letter arrived from Prestige Community Management. This one wasn't a simple fine notice. The language was colder, sharper, and far more terrifying. Notice of intent to record a claim of lien. Dear Mr. Hansen, please be advised that your account for the property located at 128 Larchmont Lane is severely delinquent. The outstanding balance for unpaid fines and administrative fees related to violation the rear fee 2023-1118 is now $450. You have failed to cure the violation despite repeated notifications. Pursuant to the authority granted in the Chestnut Grove, CC&Rs, and the State Property Owners Association Act, the Board of Directors has voted to place a lien on your property to secure the amount of the delinquency. If the outstanding balance is not paid in full, and the violation is not cured, i.e., the fence is not removed within 30 days of the date of this notice, the association will record a claim of lien with the county recorder's office. Once a lien is recorded, the association may choose to initiate foreclosure proceedings to satisfy the debt. This is your final notice before formal legal action is taken. The letter was signed not by a person, but by the Legal Compliance Department of Prestige Community Management. The corporate impersonality was chilling. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute anymore. It was a formal, legal process designed to seize his property. He showed the letter to Sarah. The color drained from her face. She sat down heavily on the kitchen stool. A lien foreclosure. Her voice was barely a whisper. Jake, this has gone too far. They could take our house, our home, for a fence. It's a threat. Sarah, it's how they scare people into compliance. It's what they did to David Chen. It's working, she cried, her composure finally breaking. I'm terrified. We have 2 kids. We have a mortgage. We can't fight a whole legal department. Just pay the fine. Take the fence down. Please. It's not worth losing everything. Doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through Jake's resolve. Was he being principled, or just stubborn? Was he putting his family at risk for the sake of his pride? He looked out the window at the fence, the symbol of his defiance. And, for the first time, he saw it as a liability, a multi-thousand-dollar mistake. The pressure was immense, a physical weight on his chest. He was on the verge of giving in. Let me make one more attempt, he said, his voice strained. The annual homeowners meeting is next week. It's a public forum. Every homeowner will be there. Denise has to answer to them, not just to me. Let me present what I've found. If that doesn't work, I'll take the fence down. I promise. Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with tears and fear, but she nodded. It was his last chance to fight back before the walls closed in. December 19th, 2023. The Chestnut Grove Community Clubhouse was packed. More than 50 homeowners sat on uncomfortable folding chairs under the same humming fluorescent lights. A folding table at the front served as the dais for the board of directors. Denise sat in the center, flanked by her allies and the HOA's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, a representative from Prestige Community Management. A harried-looking woman named Brenda sat at the end of the table, managing a laptop. On a large screen behind them, a PowerPoint presentation was projected. In the top corner was a digital countdown timer, currently set to 3:00. Jake sat in the third row, a simple manila folder on his lap. It contained his evidence, neatly labeled. He had registered for one of the 3-minute public comment slots. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic rhythm against the dull hum of the lights. He glanced at the entrance just as Denise was arriving earlier. He saw her sitting alone in her car, her head leaning against the steering wheel. For a brief second, the mask of authority was gone, replaced by a look of profound exhaustion and defeat. Then she straightened up, composed her features, and walked into the clubhouse. President Caldwell, once more. The meeting droned on with budget reports and landscaping updates. Then Denise said, "Next, we have a final appeal on an enforcement matter. Agenda Item 6.A, the non-compliant mailbox at 72 Blossom Court." An elderly woman with a walker, Maria Sanchez, slowly made her way to the microphone. Her voice trembled as she explained that she had replaced her rusted-out mailbox with a new one that was identical in every way, except the post was black instead of the required dark bronze. "I am 82 years old," she pleaded. "I live on Social Security. I cannot afford to pay a painter, and also the $100 fine. Can you not just give me a warning?" Denise listened with a pained, sympathetic expression that was utterly false. "Maria, we appreciate your situation, but the rules must be applied equally to everyone. If we make an exception for you, we have to make one for everyone. The board upholds the violation and the fine. Thank you." Maria looked crushed as she slowly made her way back to her seat. A low murmur of disapproval went through the crowd. Denise ignored it. "We will now move to the open forum," Denise announced. "Each speaker will have 3 minutes. First up is Jake Hansen." The timer on the screen reset to 3 or 0 and began to count down in large red numbers: 2:59, 2:58. Jake walked to the microphone, his hand steady despite the tremor inside him. He placed his folder on the lectern. "Good evening. My name is Jake Hansen, from 128 Larchmont Lane. Most of you know my situation. The board is trying to force me to tear down a fence I built for my children's safety, and they are now threatening to foreclose on my home to do it." He held up a sheet of paper. Exhibit A. This is the violation notice. It cites one rule, Section 8.4.2, which prohibits obstructing a scenic vista from the common area. He then held up a large, rolled document. Exhibit B. This is the official plat map for our community, certified by the county recorder. It shows every legal easement on my property. As you can see, there is no view corridor or scenic easement. It does not legally exist. The rule they are fining me under is based on a legal fiction. The murmuring in the room grew louder. Denise's face was like stone. "So why?" Jake continued, his voice rising. "Would the board invent a fake rule and enforce it so aggressively against me? That brings me to Exhibit C." He held up the unredacted minutes Eleanor had given him. These are the board minutes from October of last year. The version sent to homeowners has entire sections blacked out, but this is the full version. He looked directly at Denise. "These minutes detail a secret negotiation between our board president, Denise Caldwell, and the developers of the new luxury condos next door. The plan is to sell a piece of our common area greenbelt to that developer. A deal contingent on guaranteeing an unobstructed view across our park, a view my fence supposedly blocks." The room erupted. People were turning to each other, whispering in shock. "And the most interesting part," Jake said, his voice cutting through the noise, "is that the deal includes a $50,000 finder's fee to be paid to a consulting company, a company that, according to state business records, is owned by one Denise Caldwell." The chaos was immediate. Shouts of "thief" and "resign" filled the room. Denise was pale, speechless. The HOA's lawyer quickly jumped to his feet and strode over to Jake. He leaned in close, speaking in a low, urgent whisper, as Denise banged her gavel uselessly. "Mr. Hansen, stop right now. My client is prepared to rescind all violations and fines against you. Immediately. We'll wipe your record clean." Jake felt a wave of relief. He had won. "But," the lawyer added, his eyes flicking over to Maria Sanchez, the old woman with the walker, "as part of the deal, you will get back up to the microphone and state that you believe the board was acting in good faith, and that you support their consistent application of the rules, including in the case of Mrs. Sanchez's mailbox." The timer on the screen read 0:27. It was a trap, a brilliant one. They were offering him his personal victory in exchange for publicly validating their authority. If he accepted, he would save himself, but he would be throwing Maria, and anyone else they decided to target, under the bus. He would become complicit in the very abuse he was fighting. He looked at Sarah in the audience, her face a mixture of hope and fear. He looked at Maria, who was watching him with tired, pleading eyes. He looked at the timer. 0:15. Jake stepped back to the microphone, the lawyer's offer hanging in the air. The room fell silent, waiting. "No," Jake said, his voice clear and strong, resonating through the clubhouse. "The deal is not accepted." He turned to his neighbors. "The issue isn't just my fence. It's about the fair and transparent application of the rules for everyone. It's about a board president who used her power to enrich herself at our expense. It's about bullying an 82-year-old woman over the color of a mailbox post while planning to sell off our shared property. I will not endorse that." The timer hit 0:00. The room exploded, not in chaos, but in applause. The applause was deafening. George, the retired neighbor, stood up. "I make a motion to censure Board President Denise Caldwell and to launch a full, independent audit of the HOA's finances and contracts for the last 3 years." Second came a chorus of voices. Brenda, the management company representative, saw the impending legal firestorm. She leaned over and spoke urgently to the HOA's lawyer, who nodded grimly. "In light of the information presented tonight," Brenda announced, stepping to the microphone and speaking over the din, "Prestige Community Management recommends that the board table all pending fines against Lot 114, pending a full legal review of the cited CC&R provision and the underlying circumstances. Furthermore, we will be recommending the same for the fine against Lot 72. Denise Caldwell sat frozen, her face a mask of disbelief as her carefully constructed kingdom crumbled around her. Gary and Carol, her allies, were staring at their notes, refusing to look up. The lawyer packed his briefcase, a clear sign of abandonment. The homeowners were no longer a docile, compliant group. They were an angry, unified body demanding accountability. The system, once it was fed the truth, was finally beginning to correct itself. In the weeks that followed, the censure motion passed, and the audit was launched. Denise and her allies resigned from the board in disgrace. A special election was held, and a new board, comprised of homeowners dedicated to transparency, was voted in. George was the new president. At their first meeting, they formally voted to void the violation against Jake and expunge it from his record. They also forgave Maria's fine and amended the architectural guidelines to allow for common-sense flexibility. Jake, to his own surprise, accepted a volunteer position on the now reformed Architectural Control Committee. He was determined to ensure no one else would have to go through what he had. He helped rewrite the rules, making them clear, objective, and fair. The audit eventually revealed the full extent of Denise's plans. Eleanor's information was correct, but it also uncovered something else. Denise was in deep personal debt. Her husband's small business had failed 2 years prior, and they were facing foreclosure on their own home. The $50,000 kickback wasn't for a lavish lifestyle. It was a desperate, unethical attempt to save her own family from financial ruin. It didn't excuse her actions, but it cast them in a sadder, more human light. A civil suit was filed by a group of homeowners to recover legal fees and investigate further damages. They asked Jake to join as the lead plaintiff. He thought about the stress, the sleepless nights, the fear he had felt when he received the notice of intent to lien. But he also thought of that fleeting image of Denise in her car, looking utterly defeated. He declined to join the suit. The battle was won. His family was safe. His fence stood tall and proud in his backyard. His community was healing. He was an architect, a builder. He wanted to help rebuild trust in his neighborhood, not spend the next year in depositions tearing one person down further. He chose to build a better community, One rule, one meeting, one act of neighborly fairness at a time.